and according to the innocence within me, bring an end to the wickedness of sinners, and keep straight the righteous. For God examines hearts and reins. My righteous help is from God, who saves the upright in heart. God is a righteous, strong, and patient judge, not bringing down wrath every single day. If you do not return, he will polish his sword. He stretched his bow and readied it, and he readied his instruments of death and prepared his arrows to kindle a fire. Behold, he suffered the pains of childbirth and unrighteousness. He conceived pain and brought forth lawlessness. He opened up a pit and dug it out, and he will fall into the hole he made. The pain shall return on his own head, and his wrongdoing shall come down on his crown. I will give thanks to the Lord according to his righteousness, and will sing to the name of the Lord Most High. All right, some tough stuff in there this time around. All right, the note here at the bottom of the Orthodox Study Bible is worth taking a look at. There on the same page, it says 7. The historical background of Psalm 7 is Absalom's rebellion against his father, King David. The history is found in 2 Kingdoms 14 through 18. King David and his army prefigure Christ in the church, where Absalom and his army represent the devil and his angels. So if we wanted to go back over that, we actually did that a couple weeks ago, went through kind of the story of Absalom. But if you'd like to get sort of a background here, this would be a good place to go. Would be 2 Kingdoms 14 to 18, and that's his son Absalom. The short version of that story is that Absalom attempted to seize the throne from David and succeeded. And he drives David ultimately out, and David is defeated, and it appears that his kingship has ended. Of course, he famously becomes victorious, but his son is killed in the military action through some treachery, and this, of course, breaks his heart. You have this war, and you want God to destroy your enemies, but then what do you do when your own son is that enemy? And that's that kind of thing. So it's a good story to read, and deeply heartbreaking. And it is. I mean, it says it's a parallel to Christ and his church, but it's also a really good picture of what the Lord must have felt with Judas, right? He says, my own familiar friend, right? We've gone through everything together, and you've seen through all the same things that all the other apostles have, and the heartbreak that comes with that realization. There's a beautiful hymn. I guess it's not a hymn. It's just a secular song that's a Greek folk hymn, basically, about how there's two women are in Jerusalem mourning that their sons have died that day. And as they're talking, it turns out it's the Theotokos and Judas's mother, both lamenting the death of their sons. And so it's that helps us to feel the pain of what it really was that Judas would betray our Lord. Probably very much the same kind of pain as David had in his son betraying him and not desiring really his demise, right? You don't want that. But when you read the story of David, you're like, well, Absalom got what he paid for. I mean, you expect it, but David doesn't want that outcome. And in the same way with Judas, it's like, his death is like, well, he's the enemy of the Christ. Surely he deserves it. But you think the Lord, would be so sad and so brokenhearted over the loss of even one, even though he was foreordained, right? He was the one who would betray the Christ. So here we are, Psalm 7. We begin with these first couple verses. This whole psalm is really, like I said, going to put us through our paces here. O Lord my God, in you I hope. Save me from all those who pursue me and deliver me. Lest like a lion he snatch away my soul when there is none to redeem or save. So who are our enemies? Once again, we're surrounded by our enemies. Who are our enemies? Are they humans? Never. We don't have human enemies. Who are our enemies?
Demons.
Yeah, demons, the devil. What else?
Passions.
Yeah. Passions. Our sinful habits. And of course, sin / death. And I think if we're being really orthodox about it, we would actually reverse those two words. We say death and sin, which is the sting of death, right? Because death is the great enemy. According to the New Testament, we sin because of death. So let's reverse it. Even though we typically say in our culture, sin and death, I think it's important for us as Orthodox to say death and sin. Death is the big problem, right? This is the thing that God hates, which is why when God comes to solve our problem, he solves the death problem, right? He's raised from the dead. All right, so let's read this in light of that. O Lord my God, in you I hope. Save me from all who pursue me and deliver me, lest like a lion he snatch away my soul, while there is none to redeem or save. So if this is true of us, remember we have our little filter for the understanding the Psalms. The Psalms have at least, we'll leave this here, the Psalms have 3 layers of meaning. The first one is the historical, which we talked about for King David, right? Is his son Absalom has betrayed him and has overthrown his kingship. What's the second layer of meaning? Typological, yeah, or Christological, yeah. Fathers would say typological, but the Christ meaning of it. And this is really important for us to understand because it's really only Christ who can say Psalm 7 with a clear conscience, right? Especially where he says, redeem me, O Lord, in my righteousness, or something like, if there's any wrongdoing in my hands, right? If I dealt back evil for those dealing evil to me, then may I fall empty because of my enemies. Like, none of us would want to say that, right? It'd be pretty scary. Say, if I've done any wrong, Lord, bring my consequences on me. Like, ooh, right? No, thanks. So only Christ can say those words. And so it's important for us to understand that this is Christ. And who is, of our 3 things up here, actually it's kind of a double meaning, who are Christ's enemies? Same ones. Right? The same ones. He's fighting the demons and the devil. Of course, he's not fighting his own passions. He's fighting our passions, right? Especially in the flesh, because he has the same demands on his flesh that we have. He just doesn't have sin, right? He doesn't want to die, for instance, in the garden, right? It's not something he can want. We as humans don't want to go into pain. It's not something we want. So he's fighting against those impulses, but he's also fighting our own impulses in us. And then death and sin, ultimately. Right, that's his great enemy. And we can even imagine, and I think this is a beautiful image, kind of preempting Holy Week a little bit for us, is we have death like a lion, right? And he's prowling, and he's waiting, right, to get a leg up on the writer of the psalm here, David, Christ, us. So like a lion, he snatched my soul away when there's none to redeem or save. Right? So Jesus in the Garden of Gethsemane, you can imagine he's praying, what? That he can avoid death? Maybe, because there's an element of that, right? Lord, Father, if this could pass from me, right? But nevertheless, not my will, but thy will be done. Okay, so the Lord accepts that, but also the understanding of death is surrounding him. He is actually going to succumb to his enemies, just as David succumbs to his enemies. So his trust has to be to God that even though this attack is occurring, that he's going to come out on the other side victorious, right? So we can kind of see Christ facing his own death in these words. And this is, so the saints this week that I consulted, throughout St. Augustine, St. John Chrysostom, and St. Athanasius, both St. Augustine and St. Athanasius really want to push the idea forward that this is Christ's psalm. All right. So it's not necessarily that we don't have enemies. It's not necessarily that there's not a battle. It's that we don't be overcome by that enemy. Right? And then only Christ can then say, obviously, if I have dealt back evil to those dealing, or, O Lord my God, if I have done this, if there is wrongdoing in my hands, if I dealt back evil to those dealing evil to me, then may I fall empty because of my enemies. We could think of that once again as Christ is facing the crucifixion, right? What's he being crucified for? mean, essentially, he's being crucified for our sins. He's being accused of the things we've done, right? He is taking death on himself, which he in no way has earned. He has in no way participated in the cause of death, right? And he did not create death and so on. So he is taking on himself what is justly not his to take on at all, right? He's suffering injustice because of our injustice, right? We are the ones who are unjust to Christ. Yeah, so he's able to cry out these words, which we would fear to say. We're going to talk about how we can say them. We would fear to say them, but Christ can say them. All right, so St. Athanasius ends up kind of pointing out, St. John Chrysostom points out that in this entire opening handful of verses here, we see that this person, that the Christ, and by extension, how we're supposed to be, we don't first, he says, he does not first accuse his enemies, but first runs to God. Our first impulse in difficulty, our first impulse in the spiritual warfare, our first impulse of even, you could say, pain and suffering in this life, needs to not be so much the accusation of our enemies or whatever. It's just simply to run to God for comfort, right? It's confidence in God that we see in this psalm. He says, seek God, entrust judgment to God, and refuse revenge. And that's the other thing here that, as we said with David's heartbreak, is that ultimately Joab kills Absalom, which is not what David wanted. He wanted some kind of peaceful fix to the problem, but his head of the army decides to take revenge on Absalom, for lack of a better term, right? And we're not to take revenge, right? Vengeance is mine, I will repay, says the Lord, right? So there's this idea that like any amount of setting things right needs to go to the Lord. There can be no revenge on our part. It's also worth noting, it talks here about lest like a lion he snatch away my soul. It's good to remember 1 Peter 5:8. You might hear that line. Your adversary, the devil, walks about like a roaring lion, seeking whom he may devour. So Peter's probably thinking of psalms like this, where the lion is depicted as the enemy, the prowling sin monster that we talked about last week. All right. So the heart of all of this is that while we may have human enemies that are surrounding us, the deeper battle is always spiritual. Come on in. You just gotta find us.
Exactly. I was watching your father.
Morning.
So let's talk a little bit about human enemies. What do we do with the fact that it is actually, like in the life of Christ, human beings who are putting nails in his hands and feet, right? It's actually human beings who are trying him unjustly. It's actually human beings who have betrayed him, right? And so on. And this is an important principle that that I take from St. Silouan, the Athonite. And I think this is something that can give us a lot of peace toward other human beings who we find difficult. When we think of our enemies, we've said throughout the Psalms, our enemies are demons, right? Is that those people who act against us, those people who oppose the good that we're attempting to do, we can see them actually as victims of demons. Of sort of like the Good Samaritan story where a band of robbers has taken this person and beaten them up and left them in a ditch, is that oftentimes when the demons, this was a principle that my spiritual father used to say to me at St. Tikhon's too, is that when the devil can't get to us directly, he'll use people around us to get to us. Right? So if that person's open in some way, if that person has passions that have aligned themselves with the devil, then they can act sort of in his stead or as his instrument, as St. Augustine puts it, right? Does that make sense? So rather than seeing that person as this enemy that's got it out for me, right? Or that's a bad person, or that's an evil person, is often to think actually somehow there's a way in for a demon who's just riding on their back, driving them like a horse, right? Pulling them by the bridle of their passions wherever that demon wants them to go. And this is a really good thing for us to remember, because that's how he does us too. So unfortunately, if I'm allowing my passions to get the better of me in my life, that's not just a problem for Father Ephraim. This is probably clear for a priest, right? That's not just a problem for Father Ephraim. That's a problem for all of you. Because am I going to be able to, Lord have mercy, am I going to be able to teach the Bible well if I have passions that I'm guarding? Right? I'm going to avoid maybe those things that I have wrong in my life because I don't want to expose myself to that. And right? But you're not going to learn the Bible because I'm trying to hide something in my life. I'm trying to say this isn't a sin in my life when it is a sin in my life. Right? So it's easy to see from a priest, but that's true of all of us. Each of us have passions, and those can be gaps, places where demons can kind of get in, and from there, from that wound, pull the reins of our soul wherever they want it to go. And then we become an opening point of temptation and trial for other people. Right? Let's just say if I'm a thief, right? If I'm addicted to stealing, kleptomaniac, right? And I come to your house and I steal your stuff. That's not just a problem for me. I have a spiritual illness, that's true, but it's just become a problem for you. Right? Because I just stole your silverware, whatever it is. Right? That's how all of our sin operates on each other.
What does that say about mass media in general, let alone the internet?
Oh, and yeah. What is that? Yeah, so some of the people in the recordings have asked me to repeat the comments. The comment there was, so what does that mean about mass media? Absolutely. What does that mean even more? Like, okay, yes, the media, like there's money literally being pumped into sharing other people's passions with me. But then how much more social media, where whole algorithms are built to, as soon as we have a pattern of behavior, it exploits that pattern of behavior. That's a machine literally built to destroy us if what we believe as Orthodox is true, that the passions are that dangerous. I mean, that's, they always say that.
Come back for more.
Yeah. It's like, oh, look, he's interested in, he's got an alcohol problem. So what do I see? My ads are all alcohol. God help us, right? I mean, what's with the addiction problem in our culture? Well, goodness gracious, if you got a problem, we literally build $1 million machines to make sure that you can't get free.
Or literally just have a thought and then get online, and then the thing you're thinking about just right there, like, all right, this is getting a little too ridiculous.
Yeah, my wife and I, so Erin came to me one time and she said, I won't remember the thing, but she said, I was in a conversation today and someone mentioned something. I want to say it was Jewish or it was Muslim, but it was just a thing. Maybe it was like, I don't know, but it might have been like prayer rugs. And then prayer rugs start showing up in her social media. But then she mentions this to me in our bedroom. We're talking, and it shows up on my phone. Ooh. Wow.
I know that our phones listen to us.
Let's
right?
listen to this.
Right. So yeah. So think about that. Think about that when you're using social media, because I think it's a good thing for us to think about when we're thinking about these things, and that they like to piggyback on anything that's available. Think especially about how those passions are they're literally being given an algorithm. Machine is learning how to exploit our wickedness, yes, weakness. Isn't that amazing? Yes. And then the media, of course, you talk about the news, and it's so funny. I know most of you all here probably remember, like when I was a kid, the news had hours. You had like morning news, and you had the evening news. And you basically had an hour, maybe 2 hours, depending on the show, and you would get your news. And that was about all you were going to see of the news, except for the morning paper, or, if you had a morning and evening paper, maybe. Well, now, um, there's all-day news stations. And their job is to feed us stuff that we will keep tuning into for 24 hours. Millions of dollars to try to figure out what it takes to get us to stay glued to our television. And that's astonishing. Yeah. So it is good for us to remember that these things are a window into our soul. So we should probably be a little careful with them. Does that mean get rid of social media? If that's the way you want to take it, sure. That's not something I can do. I have to do it for my job, and I have to do it for other reasons. I would love to get off of it, but I need not to get off of it. But we do have to learn to certainly manage it. Yeah. But this is a good thing, and going back to the comment too, just remember when we're struggling with individual human beings, that we can actually see them as a victim of demons and not necessarily as like our own personal archenemy. This can really help us heal from betrayals, from people in high positions who have mistreated us, right? That we feel like, that person should have not done this, is to recognize that actually it's a pretty good indicator that there's some sort of opening, that a demon saw an opportunity to just start pulling on the reins. And also maybe possibly, specifically because they also know our weaknesses, right? And so we can actually pray for our neighbors who are, giving us a hard time, because they also might be being attacked to get to us, right? If you're in Great Lent, there's a handful of y'all here who've had little kids during Great Lent. If you have little kids during Great Lent, you see this a lot. Kids will do things. Kids will have, fights that they don't usually have, or they'll be short-tempered where they aren't normally, or whatever it is. And I've always thought that's the most unfair thing, that the demons pick on our children. Because they're not expected to be able to control their anger yet. They're not expected. But so the demon's like, well, if I'm not going to get to Father directly, I'll get to his kid. And the kid's, wigging out during a service, and I have to keep taking him out. So you'll see me, like if I'm in a service and some kid's screaming, especially during Lent, you'll just see me smile, because I know what's going on, right? It's just the poor kid, some little demon's bugging them just enough to make them mad, and the poor parent has to keep doing it. But that's a victory, actually. To have a screaming kid in church and to continue to bring them back and to keep bringing them back and keep bringing them back is a victory. And we have to just understand that about people who hurt us, people who fail to be who they're supposed to be, right? Whether that's a doctor who doesn't come through for us, or whether that's a priest maybe in our life, or a teacher in our life who, didn't do the thing they were supposed to do. We can begin to have some healing and understanding that there's a lot of gaps and weaknesses that each person has. All right. So we proceed on then. We've already talked about some of these verses, so I'm sorry I keep passing back through them. But it's hard not to with this psalm. It's so beautiful. So let's talk about this next line. We already said that only the Lord can say, "O Lord, if I have done this, if there's any wrongdoing in my hands, if I dealt back evil to those dealing evil to me, then may I fall empty because of my enemies. Then may the enemy pursue and overtake my soul, and trample down my life to the ground, and make my glory settle in the dust." Now, in some of the research that I did, one of the things that comes out a lot is Christ fulfills this perfectly, but each of us pray it aspirationally. That is, we pray it to be able to say it. That maybe we could be, that way. But I'd like to raise a third interpretation here. I hope you'll allow me to kind of go down my own rabbit trail here. When I pray the Psalms personally, my understanding of this has been that Christ is in my soul by virtue of baptism, by virtue of chrismation, and by virtue of Holy Communion, right? The Lord is dwelling in me, the center of my very being. And we would say the heart, right? And in as much as Christ is within my heart and is driving away my enemies, right? Driving away the demons, the passions, death, and sin. In as much as he's doing that, he prays that in us. Because this is where it gets weird, but it's actually been very helpful in my own life, is to understand that the passions that I'm cultivating are the enemies of God. in my life, in my heart. He's praying from this innocent place where he stands in my heart to drive away the enemies that are in my life. So if I continue in my passion and sin, Lord of mercy, preaching to myself here, then I am amassing more enemies surrounding Christ in my life, in my heart. Whereas if I'm on his side and I'm helping to drive away those passions and death and sin, then I'm not able to say those words, I'm innocent, I'm innocent, defend me, but I can say in me that Christ is innocent, drive away his enemies in me. And it's really been helpful because what it makes me understand is I'm not the center of my own life. I'm not even the center of my inner life. Christ is. Right? How often do we think of ourselves as kind of, I know the center of the world, but also not. Like we can even in our humility though still feel like it's me versus my demons or it's me versus my sins. But it's actually not. It's Christ versus my sins in my life. And I'm either allied to my sins and passions or I'm allied to Christ in my life, driving those things out of my life. Right? So then I can pray that prayer, not because in my own conscious identity, I'm not so innocent that I would want to say, bring my enemies on me if I've done this. But Christ in my heart is saying, if I've been in any way unfaithful to Father Ephraim, if I have failed in any way to be the Lord of his life, then let his enemies destroy him and me. Oh, well, Christ is faithful. I can be 100% confident that Christ is going to be victorious, that he can say that in my heart. So that might be another way we can pray prayers like this and actually make them our own, understanding that it's really Christ in me that's praying them, but also that I'm on his side. So I'm joining him in his prayer, but I can't say his prayer the same way he can. Anyway, that's been my kind of way I take it. What this also does teach us is a deep spiritual principle as well, which is that sin is what opens up gaps that allows the enemy to get in. It's not a small thing, right? I heard a person once say, I don't love the analogy, but I'm going to share it with you because it is a helpful analogy. Just don't take it too literalistically. That their spiritual father said that each day that we do our prayer rule, morning, we put down a brick. Evening, we put down a brick. Morning, we put down a brick. Evening, we put down a brick. And if we miss our prayer rule, you don't get to put a brick there. You have to skip it. And there's a hole in the wall. And anywhere there's a hole in the wall, obviously the wind can get through. The devil can get through. Right? So if we have that kind of a mindset about our prayer rule and about our life in Christ, that can be a good guide. Please don't take it literally or literalistically, because if you go legalistic on that, it gets real ugly real quick. It's not healthy. Okay, so we're not saying don't do it in an unhealthy way. Okay, but it is a good way for us to think. Like small sins are still sins, and those sins are gaps that allow the demons actually to get access to us. And this is what this passage ends up meaning, right? If I have done any wrongdoing, then may my enemy pursue and overtake my soul. In other words, if we do something evil, it is perfectly within God's right to remove his protection from us and let the demons have what they've now acquired for themselves. So if it gives us a little compunction and a little trepidation about missing our prayer rule, or it gives us makes us be a little more careful, then that's good. Please don't take it literalistically though, because you go too far with that and it gets almost like works righteousness or works salvation or whatever you want to say it, which we don't want to go down that road. Oh, well, the demons are going to win because I just missed my prayer rule. Yes, but yeah. Okay, so we continue on. All right, so now we get into the Lord's anger again. Arise, O Lord, in your anger. Be exalted to the very boundaries of my enemies. Awaken, O Lord my God, in the ordinance you commanded. All right. So St. Augustine takes this to be about the Lord's resurrection, which obviously Holy Week agrees with him, because what do we say in Holy Week when Pascha starts and the divine liturgy starts. Let God arise, let his enemies be scattered, let those who hate him flee from before his face. I mean, when Christ comes out of the grave, his enemies flee. They're scared because he doesn't come out, all peaceful, meek, and mild coming out. If you're a demon, he isn't coming out nice. Right? What's that?
It's a false mustache.
Yeah. So he's coming out to do battle. He's destroyed death, which was the great enemy that drove them in the first place. He's taken away the best tool they've got. He's destroyed sin in his flesh because he's taken on him what sin, right? Sin's only consequence, and he broke its back. So it's just like sin and death are just laying there in pieces. And he comes right out of the grave and he's after the demons. And he goes one by one in this world and destroys them. What do I mean by that? The reason we live in a world where there's almost no paganism is because Jesus Christ has been victorious over the demons in this world. That's actually what's happened. He made it his personal mission to overthrow every idol. And he pretty much has. Right? With a few small exceptions, and even there we have strong outposts of the faith. He has made it his personal duty to destroy anything that can bind us to death and sin. Death and sin have now been destroyed and ripped apart, and they're just like their corpses are just laying on the side of the road, and now the demons are just being absolutely pummeled by the resurrection. So this rise up, Lord, in your anger, this is the way we should see it. He's not just coming out to nothing. He's coming out, this is battle. And there's nothing that can stop him. Right? So he rises up in his anger. And remember, we talked about the righteousness of anger. Anger is meant for good. What's it meant for? The destruction of demons, the destruction of sin and death. Right? The destruction of passions. Anger is a good thing pointed at the right thing. Anger is a bad thing pointed at the wrong thing. Right? So the Lord comes out, and what's he angry with? All the demons who have enslaved us. Right? Be exalted to the very boundaries of my enemies. In other words, now he's coming out and he's not only hitting the enemies that have encircled me, that's one thing. He's now pushing them back into their own territories and past their own territories. I mean, this is just complete and abject, total war against the demons. There's no room for them. There's no room in this situation for them anymore. He gave them that time. And so the congregation of the people shall surround you, and because of this return on high. So now there's this idea that where I was once surrounded by my enemies, I'm now surrounded by a congregation of people who are on God's side. Yeah.
I think it's funny because that's the came on during Matins, during Tone 7, and it's Psalm 7.
And what?
And it's Tone 7, for Tone 7 and Psalm 7.
Yeah. Oh, yeah, there you go. Oh, I wonder if there's a connection there. Yeah.
I have a different translation, but it's the same.
Yeah. So then it says, the Lord shall judge the people. It seems very clear by that verse that whatever's inspiring, however we can speak of the inspiration of David, this is obviously operating in a very prophetic manner because he knows that this is the Lord who will judge the people, right? Arise, O Lord, in your anger, and then it's the Lord will judge the people. So the Lord's judgment, of course, coming forth from his resurrection. Judge me, O Lord, according to my righteousness and according to the innocence within me. This is something that we can actually say, right? Is that we want the Lord to see what's good in us and not judge us according to the bad things that we've done. Not to see the ways I fail him, but Lord, look at the ways that I'm trying. And the comfort of that, remember that very familial aspect of understanding, right? That the Lord is looking, like you look at your own child, or like you look at a family member, like they do something wrong, and all you really want to do is just reconcile them. Like you're not sitting there hoping to bop them upside the head. You want this for them. It's the same way with the Lord here, right? So he's looking for the good, right? All right. Are there any questions? I've kind of gone pretty hard at this, but we've had some good discussions already. Any questions? Yeah.
When it says, "Awaken, O Lord my God, and the ordinance you commanded," it seems to me that one of the famous Davidic sins that I don't think we've talked about at all is actually more than adultery, more than murder, was, strangely enough, to modern ear, was census taking
Yeah.
of the army in
Yeah.
particular. And in the ancient world, counting is exerting your own personal agency over whatever it might be, ownership.
Mm-hmm.
And of course, the sin is that the army, especially, needed in those days to be God's army.
Mm-hmm.
And so it seems as if this whole passage is almost an apologetic for that famous sin of his, which was census taking. There is just innumerable, there's just evidence after evidence that that was a bigger deal in his day than Bathsheba.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Which,
even in
at
the
first
scriptures.
glance, it just doesn't make sense. But if you think of it in terms of agency and whether or not you're in control,
Yeah.
you're exerting power, or is God exerting power?
Absolutely. Because God had always taught them, right, that you are not victorious because of your army, you're victorious because I'm your God. So by David counting the people, by saying, how many people do I have on my side? He's basically saying, it's up to me. It's up to me and my human agency. Absolutely. Absolutely. And it is the bigger sin because the other ones he repents of, and there are very few consequences beyond his own family. But when he does the census, the three options he's given are very serious. And they're options, but he can't get out of it. Right? He can't just he pleads forgiveness, but he has to take one of the punishments, one of the judgments of God in order to overcome it. Absolutely. Absolutely. That's interesting. I would have to really think about that. I'm certain it does play a major role in the Davidic story, and I do agree with you. I think it is viewed. You can even tell by the consequence. It's viewed as the biggest of the issues, even more than Bathsheba and Uriah.
And I've often wondered what that means for us, since we are so involved in the modern world in counting and quantifying and ownership.
Lord of mercy. Yeah, 100%. Well, obviously it's related. I would agree with that. I would say it's actually probably the main thing that's at root in anxiety. And I think that one of the reasons why our culture, while we're riddled with anxiety, is that we tend to look at things in terms of counting and amassing and worrying and making sure everything's where it's supposed to be, because if anything's out of place, then we're going to lose a battle. I mean, to put it more in Davidic terms, rather than believing that God is for us and that God has already gone ahead of us to face the enemy that we're referring to. So I would say that it would be a sin that we're all very subject to, but especially in our time, because we're so, by our culture, it's almost impossible to be free from it entirely in our culture. We're so materialistic and so cause and effect in our society, and I think partly because of our scientific worldview. Not science isn't the problem; it's the fact we've made it our worldview. Is that we see everything as cause and effect, right? Instead of saying, well, God can show up and turn everything on its head, right? It's not like I do this, then this happens. It can also be I do this and God comes in and does something incredible. I have no idea what he's going to do. But we almost never think of that in the future.
But it also has, in our modern world, in this country, as far as counting in a census, it has unintended yet tended consequences. It was designed, congressional. How many people are in your area? You get a congressional person. what's going on? Do you need more this? Do you need more that? Now, because of our social media, like you brought, it's all intertwined, because now what we're counting, we are allowing it to divide us.
Mm-hmm.
Everybody is put in a segment. Race, creed, color, education, wealth, where you are, employed, unemployed, legal, illegal. We have a term, this counting has completely divided us.
That's a good point.
Segmented us.
It's a really good point.
It's really interesting how it has just
Counting does create an us versus them, because I clearly know who us is,
mm-hmm.
and therefore I know you're them, right?
Mm-hmm.
And that can be very dangerous for us also spiritually. And we've seen that in the Psalms, how we're interpreting this in an orthodox manner. The us, for us as Christians, the us is humanity. The them is demons, the passions, and sin and death. But it's so easy for us in the counting of our us's.
I mean, you can't even escape that from birth with the Social Security number.
Right.
Not at birth.
Yeah.
Automatically being counted.
Yeah, but I think what's important for us, and again, what did we see in Revelation, right? The mark of the beast, like an us and them type of situation. But I think it is important for us to ignore that stuff in our lives and to say, that doesn't define me. I mean, government, do what you're going to do. Pay unto Caesar what is Caesar's. If I have to get a Social Security card, great, whatever. But the most important thing is I don't begin then to see myself as part of this statistical group or that statistical group or whatever it is. Whatever the us is or whatever the them is, I'm neither of them. Right? We as Christians are pro-life, like all things that live, not pro-life like the segment of society that we've created called pro-life. We're that too, but we're pro-life. If it's alive, we're for it. Right? Because it's participating in God in some fashion, which is why it's alive. Yeah, we're even pro-rock, which I guess isn't alive, but it's here. So we're pro-rock as well. But, that's the idea is we're pro-reality. We're anti-unreality, non-being, non-existence, or evil, which is the absence of the good.
It's just the thing of making ourselves our own God. It's like wanting to manage everything to our will and
yes,
we put it on ourselves. That's what anxiety feels like. It's like putting it on yourself to make everything go okay.
Yeah,
which is terrifying because it never goes okay when you try to do it on your own.
yeah. The counting makes us our own God. Yeah, absolutely. And that again brings us back to why was it such a big sin? Because David's who counts the human beings? Who's the king of Israel? God. It's not David's to count. It's God's to count, and he already knows the count. So it really does show in David a motion that was sinful and that was wrong. He was setting himself up as the one, and God reminds him, "You are not the king of these people. I am." But he repents, and this is another thing to remind us: David is a man after God's own heart. Is it because he's not a sinner? No, he is very much capable of sin. What is he? He's someone who gets up when he sins. He's someone who repents when he sins. That's what makes him a man after God's own heart. He is after God's own heart. He's pursuing God's heart. Even if he makes mistakes, when he corrects, he goes right back to pursuing God's heart. And that's who we have to be. And of course, Christ being the only one who truly exemplifies that. But then David, by extension, and us by extension, if we'll imitate the best quality that he had, which was always repenting. When he was told he was wrong, he repented. Yeah. All right, so let's bring this to this next section because we're getting into some territory that it's not as dark as it's going to get in the Psalms, but we're starting on this kind of language. So verse 10, bring an end to the wickedness of sinners and keep straight the righteous, for God examines hearts and reins. My righteous help is from God who saves the upright in heart. God is a righteous, strong, and patient judge, not bringing down wrath every single day. If you do not return, he will polish his sword. Okay? So now we are starting to hear that that violence that's involved sometimes. So famous in the Old Testament. Right? St. Augustine says, God proves the heart not to learn what he does not know, but to manifest what he already sees. It reveals character. Testing in this life reveals our character. All right. So God's testing purifies the righteous and exposes the wicked. But once again, let's be clear about this. Who are the righteous and who are the wicked? Right? Solzhenitsyn famously said, if there was some group of people out there that were the wicked, then government could amass its army and destroy those wicked people, and everything would be good. But that's not the way the world works. In fact, the line between good and evil runs right through the middle of every human heart, said Solzhenitsyn. So when we understand that, we understand that when we say bring an end to the wickedness of sinners, we're talking about bring an end to the sin in me. Right? The sinner's in me. All those passions and voices that are battling their way into my heart. Right? And keep straight the righteous. In other words, maintain what is straight in me. Okay? So one word that I want to talk about here a little bit with righteous and righteousness, which is a word that comes up a ton in St. Paul. This idea of righteousness, also you could say like covenant faithfulness, as kind of a word that comes from the Old Testament as well. This idea of God's faithfulness to his commitment to us. Okay? But I also want to say when we're talking about righteousness or the righteous, that word is also the word just, or the word from which we get the word justice, or the word we get justified. These are all the same word, but the problem is in English, we don't have a word like righteousified. Right? These words cross over. They mean same things, but because we get these things confused in our English language, it's important to bring out that when we talk about righteous or righteousness, we could also say just, justice, justified, all the words that justice is part of. And the reason why I mention this is because this understanding of just, justice, justified, righteous, righteousness in the New Testament is the better way to understand justice in the Old Testament is the idea of, if you work on a word processor like Microsoft Word or something like that, you ever done justified type? This justified type is when you type, and if this is a piece of paper, every single line ends exactly in the same place, right? That's what it does. It forces everything to be aligned. That's what justice is in the Bible. It's the idea of everything being aligned properly with everything else. Righteousness is to be aligned properly with everything else. So God is the, yeah.
Like the Christians is thou art justified.
Thou art justified, yes. So our understanding of justified, this is what St. Paul means. You are justified by faith, right? And this is important for us because we tend to look at words like this as a legal thing, as like going to a court, independent jury, judge says this is the law. Corrine, did you do it or didn't you do it? And then we figure out if you did or didn't, right? And then we go back to the law and we figure out what you owe. And here's your receipt or handcuffs or whatever it is that's coming, right? But that's not the way the ancient world worked with justice. A king, even the emperor, as we see in Acts, which I'm glad we finished that book because this will help us understand this. The king was someone who was just like you, a human being. You might see their family in the market. How many people in Acts were already part of the family of Caesar that were Christians? Like, they're part of this world. They're part of the world we operate in. You might see the Lord, or however you want to say it, the Lord of the area or the king of the area, pass through the road to get where he's going to his next meeting or his next whatever. And you'd see the little entourage. So, there goes the king, right? And you might see him at the market. Oh, there's the king. right? These are people that mix and mill about to one degree or another with us. They're human beings. They're like a father. They're not like a judge who's nobody when he's just got a suit on, but he puts on that black robe and all of a sudden he's Judge so-and-so, right? That's how we tend to view it. That's not the case. They're always this person. And to be righteous or to be just or to be justified by the law was to be right by the king. As far as the king was concerned, things were good. So you could be justified if you come to the king. Let's take, for instance, the publican and the Pharisee. What does the publican do? Comes before the Lord and he beats his breast and he says, "Have mercy on me, the sinner." The Lord says he goes away justified. Why? The king, who knows him and loves him, hears him say, "I'm guilty. I'm guilty. I've done this. Help me. The law is against me. There's no salvation unless you, judge, are merciful." And the judge says, "I'll take care of it. You're good. Go." And he blots it out of the book. Nobody can accuse so-and-so anymore. He is justified. Not because he's perfect. Because the law says we're good. Does this make sense? Somebody steals a sheep. Judge says, give him back his sheep and give him another sheep and we'll be square. We'll be square. You feel me? And then the law, we're justified. Is this making sense? So when we talk about righteousness, we talk about this kind of concept. We're not necessarily talking about being like perfect. Now, God is perfectly righteous. God is perfectly square with us. He is always faithful to his commitment to us. He is always righteous according to his covenant. Right? So we can also then understand a little better, because the word starts coming up here, so I wanted to mention it. And keep straight the righteous, where straight and righteous seem related, right? Like you could say, we would never say this, but just go with me. Make this type righteous. I might take a ruler out. You see what I mean? Make it right. Make it justified. Straighten it out. That's what God's doing in our life. This is why justified for us can mean an act, like the publican who's beating his breast and he's justified, he goes home justified, but also why our life can be seen as a process of being justified. Because we're being straightened. We're being righteousified. We don't have that word. Rightified. Justified. Just okay. This is why this word is so hard to get our head around in the Bible, is because it's not a fixed term. It wants to move on us. It's useful beyond a legal context. And this is why for us as Orthodox, if you ever talk to Protestants where justification is like a major term, right? They're baffled by us sometimes. Like we just won't get pinned in. But that's because the Bible doesn't use justified in just one respect. It's referring to both the being set straight by the law, the king saying, "You're good, I'll take care of it." It's also you being straightened by the law, which would be, for instance, you stole a sheep, give him back his sheep and another sheep, and we'll call it square. That would be being straightened, justified. You're still justified in the end, but the act of doing that is the process of justification, the setting straight of what was crooked. Is that okay? Well, because it keeps coming out, so it's good to have this. My righteous help is from God, who saves the upright in heart. You see those? See how the word keeps coming up? The upright in heart. God is righteous. God is just, strong, and a patient judge. I like the word righteous here as opposed to just in English, because if you think about justice, we would feel like, well, maybe he should bring down his wrath every day. But here he's a righteous judge. He doesn't bring down wrath every day. What's a righteous judge? Well, apparently not bringing justice down on every single person. It's being righteous, being willing to straighten that which is bent instead of just pounding into dust whatever is out of order, right? So he is righteous, strong, and patient. It's beautiful. Not bringing down wrath every single day. If you do not return, he will polish his sword. He will stretch his bow and readied it. And he readied it, his instruments of death, and prepared his arrows to kindle a fire. All right. And then he turns to the sinner. Behold, he suffered the pains of childbirth and unrighteousness. He's talking here about how sin is conceived in our lives. When we first conceive of unrighteousness, of bent life, of evil, we conceive in pain. We bring forth lawlessness. It's this idea that like this thing, our body, our human life, is not meant to bring out evil. It takes work for us to do evil. Right? We conceive in pain and bring forth lawlessness. Open up a pit and dug it out. Opening up a pit is, and he will fall into the hole he made. So the idea there, robbers back then would, on a trail, where a lot of people would go, you dig a big pit and you cover it up with other stuff that's like along the road. And then when somebody comes, they fall into the pit and then you can rob them. But of course, the problem with pits like this, you can fall into them yourselves, right?
Could that also be looked at as in like reaping what you sow?
Yes. It's but it's exactly the idea that like live by the sword, die by the sword, or whatever. It's the idea that like if you live that way, the consequences of that way of living will be your consequences. Now, you think you're digging up a pit to rob people, but you're actually going to fall in the pit and be robbed yourself. You're digging a pit to hurt innocent people. The demons are digging a pit that you're going to fall into. You might say it that way too. But the idea is, and of course it's also kind of, I think, a little funny, right? Trying to trap something in a pit, but you fall into it. It's like Gilligan's Island or something. I'm sure there was a episode of Gilligan's Island where they fell into their own pit or something. You know, it's real classic. But that's what sin is. We think we're going to do this evil and we're going to hurt our neighbor when actually we hurt ourselves. We may hurt our neighbor too, but we also hurt ourselves. So we fall into the hole that we make. The pain shall return on his own head, and his wrongdoing shall come down on his crown. What's so interesting about this whole idea is, notice. So we have the Lord. He polishes his sword. He stretches his bow and readies it. It has a fire on it. Well, what happens when God lets the bow go? The person gets the consequences of their sins. See, the wrath of God is not God getting mad at us and bopping us upside the head. It's God taking his hand away from us and allowing us to get the consequences of what we've earned. So we call it the wrath of God, but in fact what it would be more like is his lack of protection or his moving away. And this is what we're praying he doesn't do, right? Lord, don't give me what I've made for myself, but stay near me and guard me. But God's telling us, yeah, but you need to not do those things because you can't dig pits for people. I'm not going to protect robbers, right? I'm not going to protect people who are constantly hurting my other people, right? Whenever my family, one of the kids hits another kid, I always say to my kid who hit the other kid, no one is allowed to hit my children. Right? You see where I'm coming from? You, but everybody in the world is not allowed to hit my children. But you took your family responsibility and decided to do this. Right? But do you see? Because that's what's really going on. God's not going to sit there and let us hurt his children and just be like, oh, it's okay. It's like, no, at some point you need to get what you deserve because you got to stop hitting my kids. But ultimately, the psalm ends in a beautiful way. I will give thanks to the Lord according to his righteousness and will sing to the name of the Lord Most High. So once again, we have this idea that God is faithful to judge rightly. And again, we have that word righteousness. We give thanks to the Lord according to his righteousness, right? He is the one who is square. He is the one who is faithful. He's the one who always comes through on his promises. He's the one that no one needs to ever straighten. But he's also the one who makes us straight when we're bent, justifies us when we're unjustifiable, and sets us in a way that's good for us. And so we could also see this in our life. So if God prepares his arrow and shoots it at our passions, right? And our passions get what's coming to them so that we can get away from our passions. Then in the same way, he has straightened us in some way. He's made us righteous. He's made us straight where we were bent, square where we weren't. Did you have a question? Oh. All right. All right. I think that covers it. Does anybody have any questions? Kind of cool, right? I've been really excited by the Psalm study. We're getting to deal with a lot of the spiritual life of Orthodoxy that is just very much in the Psalms, but you don't get to talk about it all the time in other contexts. You know, we did Matthew's Gospel. We got to talk about a lot of this stuff. Acts, a little less so. Revelation had its own things. But this has been unique in being able to delve into some of these concepts that are all over the Psalms, but you know, we haven't got to talk about before. So we'll stick with the Psalms a little longer.
Yeah.
All right, I'm going to keep checking in when y'all start telling me, Father, I don't know about this.
No, we're not going to say that.
All right.
Speaking for myself.
Yeah, and just a reminder that in the Orthodox Church, it is customary in the monasteries that we pray the Psalter every week. And so the Psalms are still to this day the heart and soul of the Orthodox Church. This is our book of prayer, most fundamentally. I think I mentioned that my spiritual father, his first prayer rule he ever gave me was reading a psalm a day. And still to this day, depending on the person, that will often be the one that I'll give to people as well. Because the Psalms remain for us transformative. And even in some of the ways we'll say these words, we'll say, I don't know if I can say those words. The disconnect there shows us that something's going on in our spiritual life. And we just don't know what it is, you know, and we have to better understand it. So it's a joy to go through these Psalms together.
Do you have a favorite song?
Oh, boy. Oh, I don't think I do.
Probably not, or it would have come right away.
Yeah.
So.
Well, there's the ones that, you know, are everybody's favorites, right? The Lord is my shepherd,
Mm-hmm.
Psalm 50, things like that, or 51 in the Masoretic. But the verse, and it comes up in multiple Psalms that has spoken to me for ages, is wait on the Lord. It comes up in so many Psalms. It's not just one. There's a lot of them. Wait on the Lord, be manful, and wait on the Lord. This idea that, like, one of the most important things that we can do as human beings, we're going to get to this first in no time, but one of the most important things that we can do as human beings is wait on the Lord. Because, you know, go back to the Old Testament, right? What is so much the problem in, like, the book of Joshua, Judges? They act without talking to the Lord. They don't wait for the Lord to act. They go and act. And I really found in my life that when I'm anxious and scared, my tendency is to want to take the reins and do something. But when the Lord, you know, in those better moments when the Lord is more present to me, I guess, for whatever reason, and shows me the error of my ways, and I wait on him, I'm astounded by how time can help. How God will help in his time, but it's his time. And if I try to act before his time, I just can't. So that's definitely a verse that consistently, if you saw my Psalter at home, it's highlighted everywhere it shows up, but not a favorite song. Yeah.
But that's that control thing.
Yeah.
We want it in our time.
Yeah.
And he does it on his time. And it very regularly lines up.
Yeah, it's the difference between St. Paisios's. I'm sure I told the story about God's justice versus human justice. Do you all know this story? St. Paisios told the story. St. Paisios would often keep 3 figs in his pocket. He would go by and he would pick figs. He would keep 3 figs in his pocket. And he said that human justice would say, a man comes to me, he says he's hungry, that he says, human justice might say, well, go pick yourself some figs. Maybe mercy in justice would be 1 fig for you, 1 fig for me, split the fig. Right? But he says God's justice is he gets 3 figs. And so he was trying to point out that God's sense of justice is nothing like humanity. And I think that's true. I think that's the difficulty of working with God, is he's not like us. He's not predictable because he's not like us. And he asks us to trust him. That's what we call faith, right? And it's hard for whatever reason, even though he's faithful and we're not, we want to trust ourselves. Again, David's counting, right? We want to trust our own army, our own arsenal, our own mind, our own abilities, our own this, that, and the other. And meanwhile, we don't trust God, who's never done anything but be faithful to us. You know, it's amazing, but Lord of mercy, he grants us repentance. You know, yeah, it's tough. It's tough. I don't mind saying that, you know, it's hard working with God sometimes because he just doesn't do what, he doesn't take orders, you know, but that's really not his problem. That's our problem. He's not hard to work with. We're actually hard to work with, but he's nice to us, you know, so. Anyhow, all right, let's pray. O Lord, now lettest thou thy servants depart in peace according to thy word. For mine eyes have seen thy salvation, which you have prepared before the face of all people, light to lighten the Gentiles and the glory of thy people Israel.